Oh yeah.
I always bring the volume down 50%.
Oh, okay. That's kind of skip
It was a demo, buddy. It was a
I
demo.
know.
This is actually us playing.
Is it really? That's awesome. I was about to ask if this was like, actual like original music.
This is ours.
Nice.
If you came to see us play live in the 90s, that would have been the first song you would have heard every night.
So you guys used to have a band in the 90s.
We did.
did,
Chris was
yeah.
the singer. I'm playing guitar on that.
Yeah.
Oh, I
yeah.
love it.
Hey, boys and girls, welcome to Chris and Mike Show. I'm Chris, he's Mike, and you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and actually we're on live YouTube right now, working on the chrisandmikeshow.com website. And with us today, we have Samoa
Samoa.
Dominic. Samoa. Dang it, I knew I was going to get that wrong. Samoa.
One
Samoa.
person one time said this to me and it stuck with me. She's like, oh, it sounds like a kiss. Samoa.
That's what I thought too. That's what I thought too.
So.
But, Samoa. Samoa, and you have to exaggerate it too, right? Samoa.
You can.
Now I noticed, I did a little Facebook stalking. You speak Portuguese.
Yes, I'm originally from Brazil. Was
Right.
born there, raised there at the beginning of my life. The majority of
Okay.
my family is still there. So yeah, I'm
Nice.
fluent in Portuguese, and then I can also speak Spanish just because it's
Wow.
close enough to Portuguese. Although it's interesting. So Brazilian Portuguese speakers, like if we listen to Telemundo or something and Spanish people are speaking slow enough, like we can pick up about 90% what they're saying.
Wow.
It doesn't work the other way.
Interesting.
Spanish speaking people cannot understand Portuguese. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic.
Really?
So here's a
Yeah,
question-
I don't
here's a
know why
question
that
for-
is.
Okay, so
Here's a
I
question
work
from-
with a lady. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mike. Go
I
ahead.
work with
No,
a
I was just-
lady whose family is from Mexico every day. So I'll be curious to see what her take on that is, because we've talked a little bit about that subject, but
Yeah.
I can't remember what the context
I
of
have
the
never come
conversation
across
was.
like a Hispanic person who hasn't studied Portuguese. Obviously, it's different if they study Portuguese,
Sure.
but just like cold turkey, Brazilians can understand, like I said, 75-80% of Spanish if they speak slow enough. But it never works the other way.
Okay,
That's fascinating.
So my question here is, Mike, are we in? Where's Portuguese? No, where Brazil? Are we in Brazil?
No, I'm in Ohio.
No. Meaning our show. We're in 20 countries. I'm asking Mike, are we in Brazil?
Oh,
I don't think Portugal or Brazil is on the list. So
oh, we got to
now-
make that happen.
Well,
Thank
because
you,
now that's
please.
where I was leading it. See, because you're up here on the screen, so I'm telling you now. You have to make sure your family tunes in when we put your episode.
Yeah,
on.
I'll plug the show away, and I also have a brother in Luxembourg, so we'll get you guys in, all over the place.
Nice.
that's awesome. We're in 20 countries. We would like to
Right.
be in 200. So
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
We're trying to get everybody from the countries that are listening to us to join us, but it's harder than you would think.
Yeah.
You know,
The nice thing now is like with CapCut, you can just do the auto translate at the bottom. So even though we're speaking in Portuguese, you can have CapCut auto translate into, we're speaking in English. You can have
Right.
auto
Caps-
CapCut
yeah.
translate into Portuguese, and it's like 90% okay. Like, it might miss a few like
Okay.
in between the lines or like slang type of stuff.
Yeah.
But it does a pretty good job.
Cool. Yeah, this is all through an app called Riverside FM, so they do everything. The artificial
Okay.
intelligence breaks it all down and has all the captions, everything. I use captions for my own business stuff. I have CapCut, but I find captions is a little bit more user friendly for me anyway. I don't know.
That's good to know.
But captions does the same thing. It can do different languages.
I'm going to have to
Okay.
keep that in mind, though, that I could
Yeah.
bring it down to my desktop and actually put the translation on there. That's really cool.
Yeah, because then
I like
people
that.
can hear it in if you have guests from different countries, even if obviously the podcast is in English, you should just translate it to their natural language.
That would be awesome. I'm going to have to look into how to do that.
Ooh, that could be cool. Doing some shorts. Take one
Yeah.
short. Take the zombie short, Mike. We could put all the different languages for all the different countries, and we can tag them.
We're going to make that happen.
I like
That's
it.
awesome. Thank you for the suggestion. I
Yes,
like it.
nice
Yeah,
job.
no problem.
I don't know where we go.
My
from
job
there.
here is done. We're done with the cat now.
Leave on a
Thank
high
you for
note.
tuning in. George Costanza.
While I'm on top.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. George Costanza. You ever watch Seinfeld? I'm out.
Oh, yes.
It's going to leave on a high note.
Leave him hanging.
Hey,
So,
we have a listener that tuned in right at the beginning. His name's Michael. He said, "Hey guys, looking forward to this show." So, do we
Hey,
know a
Michael.
Michael out there
Hi, Michael.
other than me?
Did you just plug in onto your other device, Mike?
No, I wish I could take credit for that.
We also stream on a thing called Twitch, so it's on Twitch and YouTube every time we go live. And because we have we've increased our following since March from about 23,000 all the way up. We're close to 120,000
Wow.
views.
That's
Our
awesome.
subscribers have jumped from like
About 6,000% in the last
Right.
10 days
It's
for some
insane.
weird reason.
But the benefit
Love
of that
it.
is because we have shorts. I have shorts scheduled twice a day, and I'm actually moving them to 3 times a day because we have so many shorts that it alerts people. Like we had a musician on, Joseph, originally from Canada, now he's in Oklahoma, that he'd been following us from the beginning, and we didn't know that. We had no idea until he was on the show, and
He
then
was
That's
like,
awesome.
I love your show. I've been listening to it
Yeah.
for a long time now.
which
That's
is
Thank
so
you very
awesome.
much. It is. It's
Yeah.
very cool.
yeah. So that was fun. So I was again Facebook stalking you a little bit. You're married. You got kids. Five
Yeah.
kids. 5 kids.
5 kids. Yeah.
Man,
So
that keeps you busy.
it does.
And-
So I have
and-
4 teenagers and then
my
a
Lord.
toddler.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes. Let me tell you, having teenagers and a toddler at the same time, not for the weak of heart.
can't
Like
even
definitely
imagine.
not.
No, I mean you have a benefit of 4 teenagers helping look out for the toddler,
You think, in
but then you
theory.
have- right?
Are you saying that doesn't work out that way?
It depends on which teenager we're talking about.
Okay. What are the ages of the kids?
So the baby is 3.5,
Okay.
and then this is my second marriage, so
Okay.
she's my husband's kid. She's his only child,
Okay.
and then the older 4, they're almost 16, 17, 18, and 20. And the 18-year-old is she's considered severely autistic.
Okay.
You wouldn't when she was diagnosed back in 2010, the way that the diagnosis worked, and I haven't dived into the details of that anymore.
Right.
It used to be that like where you fell on the spectrum depended on how big of a gap it was between what you could do and what a typical person at that same age as you could do.
Oh, okay.
And so it could be it was a progressive diagnosis. You could start as mild if you were diagnosed at 2.5, because obviously what a typical 2.5-year-old can do is a lot
Right.
less than what you expect a 10-year-old to do. So she's
Correct.
considered severely autistic. That's been quite the journey with her. Her and I, it's been, a part-time job for me, and she works really hard, and we have a phenomenal team around her.
Cool.
I fought really hard to kind of fight through treatment options, and we've kept everything holistic mostly with
Oh,
her,
good.
as well as just great therapists and such, a team that really believes in seeing where she can go versus being stuck where she is. And so she's come such a long way from she regressed into autism, and so she's come such a long way from being the kid who was like smearing shit all
Can
over
I ask
rooms.
you a quick question?
Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, but I know you could do a whole show on just that alone.
Yeah, I
and-
could.
And that's a beautiful story. What kind of holistic medicine worked best for her that they would prescribe pharmaceuticals for traditionally?
In lieu of, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, in lieu of?
Yeah.
So I guess the one thing that I would say, because I've gone through windows with her where like puberty and a couple other like life situations where her behavior did escalate at times. So
Okay.
she's actually broken my nose before.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
Other issues like that. And her therapist at the time started to be like, maybe you want to look at medications. The thing is, there
Okay.
is no medications for autism. And you can kind of play Russian roulette and get a child on, they tend to put kids a lot on a medication that's for adults with schizophrenia. There's no long-term studies on how safe that is for children. And most adults who are on that medication, their life expectancy is about 50 to 60 years old. So it's just like, yeah, no, thank you. They sometimes put them in ADHD, anxiety, depression medications, things like that. But again, nothing is studied or long-term. It's not specific for autism. And a lot of them have severe side effects. I have a couple friends whose kids
Right.
have had to do that route, and they've developed seizures. They've put on more weight. They developed other neuroses because of the medication and things like that. So for her, she was diagnosed by a typical doctor at University Hospitals, which is a great system right here by us. And she gave me this reading list, and I left there and went right to the library and checked out several of those books. And one of them was called Facing Autism. And this mom talked a lot about how she, cleaned up her son's diet. So they went gluten-free, dairy-free, and then she did a lot of research, and she spent, I don't know if he was her only child, which that was difficult. By the time Naomi was born, or Naomi was diagnosed and regressed, I already had 4 kids, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
and very close in age, and I was in an unhelpful relationship. So there was just a lot, but with a little bit of energy and mind space I had, thankfully this book really guided me a lot. And then from there, I came across an organization called National Autism Association, and they
Okay.
had a conference coming up. So I attended that. And the conference was really what we would call now, like, it was called biomedical, but now it's really what we'd call like functional medicine. It's really under that umbrella nowadays, in my opinion. And so I originally was a pre-med person, so science, medicine, all that stuff I was really familiar with. And a lot of these doctors there wasn't no research for a lot of this. Autism, the increase in numbers were still recent, 10 years, 15 years ago when she was first diagnosed. And so a lot of these doctors were in the trenches doing the research as things were going on. But what really impressed me too was that the doctors that were there presenting, they were all sorts of doctors. There was doctors that had been family practitioners for 20 years. Some were, GI specific. Some were just everywhere in the medical field. But every one of them had a direct link to autism, was frustrated with the lack of knowledge and options out there for treatment, and then decided, for the sake of helping their nephew, their own child, whatever the situation was, to then like dig into things. So the
Gotcha.
main thing for sure was going gluten-free for her.
Okay.
She was really dairy-free for a long time. Now she's like mostly dairy-free, but gluten till this day. Cleaning up her environment. So like right away, I went to using just plant-based cleaners, and like my laundry no longer smells like anything, which is like, I kind of miss the downy smell, but
Right.
it just cleaning a lot of that stuff up. And then after about a year or so, and even that just showed improvement, some supplements, like we did my MB12 shots like on her bum for about a year and a half. That helped her a lot. Trying to get her a lot of fish oils. It was hard at first, but now, like once she got to be about 6, 7, and she learned how to swallow capsules, that changed the game a lot too. So just, vitamin D, magnesium, a lot of that stuff. And then the hyperbaric oxygen chamber.
Really?
Yeah. So for about a year, I did about 20 to 25 hours a week of her therapy in that, and that like really spiked up her speech and
Wow.
calmed her down. It's known for like increasing oxygen levels to the brain and a bunch of other
Healing,
things.
right.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
reducing inflammation. But a lot of kids with autism have really, really screwed up guts. And so the other thing that hyperbaric does, it tends to kill off candida, which is a really strong yeast type of a thing in the stomach that can be
Oh.
hard to get rid of. And that irritates them a lot. So like that really boosted her a lot as well.
And
And
so
then
she had no issues getting into the hyperbaric chamber?
it's
Cause I,
huge.
okay. 'Cause-
Even the home unit is pretty
yeah.
big.
Okay.
And what I ended up doing, because, it was a little skittish at first. She used to go
Sure.
with either me or her older brother for the majority of the time. And at this time, she was in a mode where it's like you couldn't keep your eye off of her.
Okay.
So it became like a reprieve for me, because it was like, oh, great, for an hour and a half, she's actually just sit still.
Yeah.
But what I used at the time was I began to limit her iPad use, except for in the oxygen tank.
Oh,
So then
There
it
you
was
go.
like, okay, yeah, I want to go in there
iPad
because
time.
then I get the iPad. Exactly.
Reward time for sure. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
used that to kind of get her on board with it. And then as she's gotten older, we reduce sugar a lot. So she almost never has artificial sugars, and food dyes. Food dyes is huge.
So yeah, we had a guy on the show, a couple guys on the show. One was Nate Palmer, then was Peter Ho. They're both health wellness type things. And my wife and I cut out bad starches, breads, crackers, things like that. I used to love Ritz crackers, like that was my thing. But we cut that out. We've had a few, 3 or 4 or 5 times where we've kind of stepped away from that, having tacos and things. But I don't even do tortillas anymore. And just the difference in that, we're going on maybe 2 months now. It's mind-boggling. Mike doesn't do dairy because he's allergic to dairy. I went a year because I had hyperparathyroidism. I went a year plus being straight up vegan, which eliminated all of that stuff. So it's interesting that has a healthier path with autism, because I worked in the field with autistic and Down syndrome, mild MR, massive MR. I worked at a place called the Mark Center in the East Valley here in Arizona, that we had 32 group homes, all adults, mentally 7, 8 years old, and the dynamic ranged from everything. We had an autistic guy that would flap his arms. We had Down syndrome would just sit there and self-stim, in the break room, do nothing but just this, right? We had some that actually, you mentioned smearing shit. We had a guy that actually would go in the bathroom, and if he was in there too long, it's like, what are you doing? You open the door, like, oh God, Really, dude? Really?
No, I used to have the girls used to share a room and it was huge. And I bought pajamas that zippered up the back and had specific it has specific like fabric around the neck that supposedly wasn't stretchable and all. I mean, I did everything. And this girl was Houdini. I bought
Really?
like special for the car seat. I had bought like special seat belt to go above the seat belt, and I would in like 2 minutes I would look in the back of my car and she'd be
Right.
completely run around. So she really was Houdini. And I mean, you literally I would open the door some mornings and
Wow.
you couldn't tiptoe across to get to the bathroom and start
Really?
to clean things up because it
Wow.
was just everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that a joy? And I lived that because I worked in that environment
Yeah.
for 13 years, and then I ended up running the group homes, but I still was there.
Yeah.
So I feel you. Been there,
Yeah.
done
Well,
that.
now she's 18. For her 18th birthday, we went to Punta Cana and she and I went partying at Cocobongo. We
Nice.
actually were just in Vegas and she went to the Shakira concert.
Oh, right on.
She works at Outback. She does CrossFit and dance
Wow.
competitions. So we've come
Yeah.
and it is still a roller coaster,
Sure.
like even like the morning that we were going to Vegas, she was like, maybe I can't go to Vegas. I need to stay home, because
Yeah.
she just
Yeah.
is nervous about the unknown. Even
Sure.
though we have been talking about it for 2, 3 months, her teachers at school are trying to help her work through it.
Yeah.
In the fall, she had a spike in behavior and she bit my husband and he had a bruise on his arm. So it's not like, oh, she's cured,
Right.
but 90% of the time, she's come such a long way. She's doing great and I'm so proud
Cool.
of her. And I wouldn't have met even 2 years ago, I wouldn't have thought she'd been able to keep a job.
Wow.
And for her to keep a job, it took about 3 months of that being like my part-time job with meetings and following up with people and
Mm.
staying on top of people to make sure that they're applying the right things. But, with the right tools in place and a lot of tenacity, you can get it done.
So she works at Outback
That's awesome.
Steakhouse.
Yeah.
What does she do there?
So she's called front of the house support. And she mostly rolls their silverware. So when they sit
Okay.
you down and they give you the silverware's
Yeah.
rolled, mostly that's what she's doing. Sometimes she has to shine the silverware because they'll come out of the dishwasher clean, but it has like the water spots
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she does that as well, folding the kids' menus. And then every once in a while, they'll have her sweep or bus tables, stack up the dirty dishes, things like that.
So the cool, the real reason why I asked that question was you mentioned that for 3 months that was kind of you helped her transition into that with the folks at Outback. That's pretty cool that they were willing to take on because I mean,
Well, here in Ohio, there's an
Okay.
organization, a government organization called
Oh.
Ohioans with Developmental Disabilities.
Oh, right on.
I'm sorry, it's called Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, OOD.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And so they paid for 3 months for her to have a job coach.
Nice.
So the majority of the work was actually done by the job coach that would be there with her. And then they started to slowly fade out. And what kept happening was as they faded out, hiccups would come up,
Right.
and then just kind of
Sure.
staying on top of everybody, making sure we're on the same page. But Outback has been, the manager there is great. And
Right on.
even, she's had 2 or 3 times where she's gone in for shifts and wasn't able to stay. And,
Yeah.
and they work through that. And then she comes next time and she's
Cool.
good. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mark Center
That's
had,
really awesome.
Mark Center had the same kind of thing with a local grocery chain that was born and bred in Arizona called Bash's, where we'd have day programs and we called them clients. So the higher functioning ones would go to Bash's and basically stock the shelves and reface
Yeah.
everything and dust and things like that. Not anything extremely physical and
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool that Outback does that. So right on. I also noticed, Smois, was that right?
Somewhat, yes.
Smois, that you are actress, model, fitness instructor, Zumba instructor, ambassador to the USA Football, or one of those things. So you just got to expand. I like life resumes. Life resumes is what I
Yeah.
call it because you just don't wake up, go to work, come home, go to sleep. Like you've done things in your life. Like Mike and I have accomplished things in our lives that other people
Like
can
having
never-
an awesome band in the 90s. I think you guys should bring that back.
We're working on it.
It's kind of why this is here, right here, because I started poking at it. I'm like, dude, we need to write some more music because I still write songs.
That's
And-
awesome.
And that's how this evolved. But so I want to know more about the actress model part, and then I want to go down the path of the fitness instructor and what there was something else that you had. I Lead, is that what it was called?
Oh, that's super old.
Okay.
My husband owns Ohio Sports Chiropractic,
Oh yeah,
and so
that was the
I
other
work a
thing.
lot with that as well. It was my full-time job for quite a few years, and then in the last year and a half, as I have ventured into my own endeavors,
Gotcha.
I've been more part-time assisting him, but that is still one of the things
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
do.
because
But I'm no
that's
longer with
yeah.
iLead. So you really went deep into my Facebook
I
there.
did.
He does his
did.
research.
That's impressive.
So with
Um,
Ohio Sports Chiropractic and Rehab, anybody that you can name drop, just out of curiosity, because we're not all those.
No, because
Oh,
of HIPAA.
oh, okay.
But he does work. You can go on the website or on the Ohio Sports Chiropractic has a Facebook page. So every once in a while you might see some people tagged on there because they're willing to tag themselves,
Oh,
but
gotcha. Okay,
I
okay.
can't actually disclose anything.
As
But
long
he
as the
does,
Queen of Flops not going there, we'll support him completely.
yes. He works a lot. He was a runner himself, my
Oh,
husband. He's one of those insane people that can run a full marathon in 2:17.
oh God,
He
that is
qualified for
insane.
Olympic trials, and so that
Wow.
75% of his clientele are other runners. So he
Right
actually
on.
works with USATF a lot and
Cool.
travels with them like
Cool.
to world championships and things like that.
Right
So
on.
stateside, he's done all of the Olympic trials and things for
Wow.
about 10 years. So
Okay.
he's gotten to treat a lot of big name, like the people who have made Olympic podiums for the track and field. He's gotten to treat
Nice.
a lot of those people that you would know the names of.
Who
And then
Usain
here at the
Bolt,
clinic,
the
surprisingly,
fastest man in the
Ohio is,
world.
yeah, that was impressive. Although, yeah, that was a hard feat for sure.
Yeah.
But Ohio has a lot of good runners and athletes.
Sure.
So yeah, he actually treated a big WWE name that was in town, and they were in town doing one of their smash downs or whatever
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
called.
Yeah.
And
SmackDown.
he was injured, and his agent found our clinic, and there was
Cool.
a couple of techniques that my husband does that isn't common. And so,
Right
and he,
on.
but he knew about it. And so during lunch when we were closed, they pulled in with their limo, and he got to treat him. And so that
Right
was
on.
probably one of his favorite because it was one of like the OGs. So he
Mhm.
remembers seeing him as like a middle
Oh, right
schooler.
on.
And so he
Oh,
really
that's cool.
enjoyed getting to treat him and chat with him.
Very cool. Death to
Yeah.
Rhodes.
I would probably know who it is because that's when I watched wrestling. Was back when
Yeah.
it was cool.
According to,
Sorry, kids.
I didn't like wrestling, but according to my husband, he was a big time, person. So yeah,
Right
I
on.
bet you would know.
That's
I
cool.
really think that, and I've always said, when you get to be past 13, if you're still into wrestling, good for you. I mean, if that's your thing, but people are going to make fun of you. You just got to know that. If
My
you're an
son's
adult male,
BFF, my 20-year-old's BFF wrestles in college. So I think he would
that's
have.
real. That's real
That's real
wrestling,
wrestling,
though.
though.
Oh,
Yeah,
you mean
right.
I'm
like
talking professional.
WWE? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. Like
yeah,
the WWE stuff where
Exactly. Yeah.
fake chair smackdowns are happening and whatnot.
For
Right,
sure,
exactly,
college
exactly.
wrestling is.
It's like still
elite.
believing in Santa, right? You can't believe in Santa after like 10 or
Correct.
11. It's like you can't believe in WWE and keep watching it.
unless you're 6'2" elf from the North Pole that is coming to New York to find his father.
Right. Which is probably the type of people that still watch wrestling.
Right. Exactly.
True story.
Exactly. True story.
So,
Yeah. Well, 'cause,
but
you know,
yeah,
back
so
then-
I have modeled my whole life almost since I can remember. So back in Brazil, and one of my uncles got into photography, and he was just getting started with his career, and one day was like, "Hey, let's come do this photo shoot with me." And I was
Nice.
4.5, 5.
Right.
Didn't know any better. Sure, you're gonna get me chocolate, I'll go with you. And he ended up winning like national prizes with this one picture of
Wow.
mine, and did all
Wow.
this stuff. And so on and off, I've, like I said, dabbled in modeling and some commercial work, was never able to really lean into it. Had a pretty traumatic childhood, and for different reasons, just didn't have the support and things like that. And then even as a teenager, kind of got back into it for a little bit, but same thing, like I had to really provide for myself and had no safety net, starting at like 14, 15. And so just wasn't something I could really dedicate time to.
Gotcha.
Back in the day, it's a lot harder than people think, modeling
sure,
and
for sure.
being in the industry. So back in the day, you had to go in person for an audition. And often these auditions are like your agent is calling you up like, hey, there's an audition like tomorrow, or
Yeah.
you might have a 48-hour turnaround, especially back in the day when it was all in person. And then if you got a call back, usually those were 24 to 48 hours notice. And you still don't know if you're going to have the part, right? Because you're going to, even a callback, you're probably down to like 5 to 7 people, and you don't know you're going to get the part and make the money. And so for me, it was really hard, even as a teenager, trying to kind of stay in the industry, because like I said, I had to provide for myself, and I just couldn't keep missing shifts to then be like, oh, I didn't even get the job. So now, I didn't work 2-3 shifts, didn't get that income, and I'm also not getting this income. So it was just hard for me to lean into it. And then I dabbled a little bit when my first was born. He actually was on the cover, on the package of the Pampers inaugural swim diapers.
Oh, that's
And yeah, because I just got him in with my agent at the time, and he got the job. His first job, he was 1 for 1, lucky guy, because usually you're like 1 for 100.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, so he got that, and I dabbled a little bit once I kind of moved to Ohio and tried to do a little bit still, and then ended up quickly getting pregnant and having babies. Once, I think, probably maybe a couple years after Naomi was diagnosed, I tried one more time, but again, just didn't have the support. My ex-husband just wasn't that type of a person, and was very controlling and jealous and possessive. So like that wasn't a thing he really wanted me to be successful at. And then my kiddos got into it. My daughter was a phenomenal dancer.
Cool.
And decided to quit, which still breaks my heart, but it's her life to live, because she really was so talented and knows people. Like, her original dance teacher is currently touring the world with Nicky Jam as a backup dancer. And a lot of it is knowing somebody in the industry that kind of pulls you in. But, and she's a gorgeous...
though? I admire your attitude, because a lot of mothers are the dance mom kind of moms. That's why there was a show called Dance Moms, right? And those people drive me crazy when they're vicariously living through their kids. So the thing that caught my ear was, it's her life to live, right?
Right.
So as long as she's not hurting herself, I admire your attitude. That's awesome.
Because it's like, I remember distinctly, there was a day that I was on a step machine at a gym. We had just moved to Ohio. I was on a step machine, not really know anybody, reading a book about parenting something or other. And it was a Christian mindset, like background type of a book. And I just remember like there was something that I read, and I don't remember the book, but I distinctly remember this moment where it just hit me like, my kids aren't my possession. It's not like, grow up to live this life that I think you should have.
And that was so common when I was growing up. I mean, my parents didn't do that, thankfully. I don't think it's as prevalent. I know it still is, and I agree with you 1,000,000%. But like, if you think back to my parents and my grandparents' generation, or our parents and grandparents' generation, that was so expected. You were to either grow up and work on the farm, if you go way back, or you were expected to grow up and go to college and be or go to work in the factory or whatever. You had 2 choices: join the military, go to work in the factory,
or go work in the farm.
Right.
Work on the farm, or go to college. If you
or be a serial killer.
That's always an option.
Because there's that.
I think for me, even though I had kiddos young, I think for me, like, I moved here when I was 6 from Brazil. My grandma had been here already, and then my mom came, and it was just me, my mom, and an aunt of mine, and then that aunt's kids, and that was it. The rest of my family was in Brazil.
And you moved to Ohio?
No, moved to Boston. So I grew up in the Boston area, south of Boston.
Southie.
I think nowadays I'm allowed to come out and say this, because there's a little bit more understanding and empathy towards it. But we were here illegally. We came legally and then overstayed the visa. So I grew up with, like, in that culture of the illegal immigrants, where you got whatever job you got, and you're just thankful that you're able to work. Which is also a side note. Like, it kind of cracks me up seeing all my, like, non-educated immigrant friends on Facebook be so passionate about, like, these ICE raids going on, because I'm sitting here like, these have been going on since like 1995. Like,
thank you.
They're just now taking credit for them.
Right. It's like, I was just, because my daughter and I were just having this conversation, because I guess one of her friends was really passionate in a particular way, that she's like, what do you think about the ICE raids? I'm like, here's the deal. Anybody who's ever been here illegally, going back to the 80s, when, I came over in 1988, it's like every single day you woke up and you went to work knowing that you had the potential of getting sent back. Either your job could get raided, you could get pulled over for running a red light, or stop, whatever. And you always would hold your breath. Like, that's been the thing since 1988 across the entire legal, at least Brazilian community. So anyways, go Go ahead.
I'm agreeing with you. I think it's people don't. We've talked about this before on the show. It's clickbait. People will read the headline, not the story.
Yeah.
And that's how most people get their news, because
And
the
so
attention span
many-
in America is a goldfish length, like 6 seconds.
I agree
Yeah.
with you. So, and that is a great point too. So many people are quick to judge without investigating the whole story. Like, if you think back to the way the news was in the 1970s, I think it ended with Reagan, where they didn't have to do this anymore, but they used to have to give you the opinion editorial, right? So
Right.
if the Republicans made a point, the Democrat had the right to rebuttal on the news.
Yeah.
That was a law. They had to do it.
Yeah.
And Reagan ended that and, basically said the news is entertainment.
Right.
Which
And
is
that's what
sad.
changed. Right. Because yeah.
I was just telling my daughter this story, so I remember my mom had a friend, and again, this is 1989.
Okay.
So my mother had a friend who had been here illegally for about 2 years. She never had a bank account in her name, never had, she had no, and again, this is 1989 when the internet isn't what it is today.
Right.
So she had no links to anything. She never had a bank account. She never, had any, she always rented a room. So no utilities were under her name, no rent,
Right.
she didn't own a car,
no paper
she had
trail.
nothing, no paper trail.
Right.
So she goes to Brazil because there's always little, something happened. She risked it to try to go to Brazil and come back, even though she was here illegally. And there was somebody who was going to do something with her passport to make it seem like she hadn't overstayed her visa, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
She comes back and gets stopped by immigration on her way back in.
Right.
They put her in a room and they come back 2 hours later and they had a list of the 4 different places she had lived, even though none of them were under her name. There was no utilities, no phones, no cell phone bill,
Wow.
that stuff didn't exist. They knew every place she had worked. They knew every place that she had lived. They knew a couple of people that she had been associated with,
Wow.
really close friends, and the guy she dated. They had all this information on her.
That's
and she was a
crazy.
nobody. She wasn't
Basically
you know-
living off the grid.
right. And
Yeah.
she she didn't commit any crimes. She had never gotten in trouble. She was really a nobody. Her bank account never had more than, she didn't have a bank account, but she never had more money, she wasn't doing anything that would have caused attention.
Right.
And they were able to pull all of that from her in 1989.
Well, that's Big Brother,
So-
because the internet, I don't think the internet started till 93, 90.
Right.
somewhere
I
in
told
the
you I
90s,
got
right?
on Amazon for the first time in 1993. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 'Cause
You
I
should have
know-
bought stock
no,
on
I
was
Amazon in
yeah.
1993. Did
I
you
take
do that,
that back.
too?
No,
didn't-
I
he
take
didn't.
that back. It was either 91 or 92.
Yeah, 'cause I
because
was
I
in co-
graduated college in 92.
Yeah, I was in college at the time, and we were at a friend's house. Glenn, his name was Glenn. We were this was the bunch of theaters, because I got out of journalism by then. But so we were hanging out doing something, probably partying, whatever. But his parents had AOL, and we're like, oh,
I remember that.
yeah, and it was. The
Did you
dial-up, and-
peep my AOL address that I
Oh,
get so much
did,
shit
I
for?
did. I saw
It
that.
literally is my first ever email address, and I never got rid of it.
Well,
if
that's
it
really-
ain't broke, why
He
fix
might have
it?
mentioned that while we were sitting there talking.
trying to figure out how because he's like, did you email the link? I was like, yeah. I said, but it's AOL.
He
You
went.
know?
Who knows if it went through?
He went. It's AOL.com. I said,
I
what?
I've got mail.
I get stuff like that all the time. Every once in
Hey.
a while, I'll have a patient because I'll work the front desk at
Yeah.
my husband's clinic, and I'll have a patient, over the phone, like, "Oh, AOL.com." Like, yes, I'm so happy. I'm so proud of you.
The reason I can make fun of you is because I still have a Hotmail account that I use.
Oh, that's almost as bad.
It is.
Almost. But going back to the kiddo stuff, so coming here illegally, having all that happen, like I said, I had a really traumatic childhood, a lot of issues with my mom, and just poor life choices, finance stuff, all kind, you name it, I've gone through it. So I quickly realized, I need to pull myself up by my own bootstraps here. I'm responsible for myself. I was actually responsible for my siblings and my mom a lot.
Okay.
So busted my butt in school. Thankfully for my 6th grade teacher totally kind of changed my mindset about things. And then I had an 8th grade teacher, because I didn't realize I was smart at this point.
Oh.
And I had an 8th grade teacher that was like, let me see what classes you picked for freshman year. Because my parents weren't, my dad, I didn't meet my dad until I was 19. And so my mom, one, she barely speaks English. She's an immigrant here. She doesn't realize how the school system works. And she herself wasn't a good student or anything like that, even in Brazil. So she wasn't she didn't know how anything worked, right? And so they had this spiel about what classes to pick. And there was 3 levels at our school. There was standard, college, and honors, and blah, blah, blah. So I had picked all middle level classes, college, and thinking like, oh, that sounded so hard and all this stuff. And then one of my teachers was like, let me see what you picked for freshman year. So I showed him. He's like, yeah, no, like this is dumb. Like you're way more smarter than this. Like, what are you doing? And then it really wasn't until I got into like freshman year, like, so I changed all my classes into honors because of this teacher. I skipped a year in science and all this other stuff. And then I basically had this teacher of mine pick my schedule freshman year. And then from that point on is when I was like, oh, okay, I guess I am smart because I'm getting A's and all of this. And this is when I realized some of that stuff. So then I decided that I was going to go pre-med. And then I decided that I wanted to go into BU's accelerated medical program, which was actually harder to get into than even Harvard.
Correct.
Because I just wanted to be done quicker because it's like, I need to make money quick.
Yeah.
I need to get on with my life, my independence kind of thing. And I got in to the
Nice.
program
Yeah.
That's
and then
impressive.
couldn't go because I was here illegally and I didn't
Oh,
have a social
damn.
security number. And
Oh,
I got a lot of financial grants to be able to attend. So I was going to pay like less than 10 grand to attend this program. And then they really worked. I actually kind of just like ghosted them. And I don't know what I was thinking at the time because I knew I wouldn't be able to follow through. And I don't know if I just thought like a miracle will happen. And my grandma has actually been a US citizen since I was 8, 9. But
Okay.
my mom just didn't follow through with getting our paperwork, done. And so I could have been legal all that time. And then, so I don't even know why, because that hit me hard when I couldn't go there. But so I
Sure.
just ghosted them because I was scared to tell them why
Yeah,
I couldn't
can see that.
accept my position and all the money, and coming out like, well, I'm illegal and what would happen. And then they kept following up with me because they really wanted me to commit to going. And then finally I told the advisor in person because I didn't want to have a phone call. I'm like, I don't know if these people are recording this call.
Right.
And so I went in person.
Smart.
I was just like, I'm like, yeah, I can't, like, I don't have documentation. She's like, oh, wait, like we can help you with that. You can just join the program as an international student. So then for about 2 weeks, I was kind of excited. She's like, that'll actually help you out because you can get your visa
Cool.
done and all this stuff, and it will help you get legal.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, but then you have to pay international student prices. And I don't know if you know anything about that, but it's about double. So I went from having to pay
Wow.
maybe 10 grand or less to more like 75, 80. And I
Oh,
was like,
no.
yeah, I can't do
Wow.
that.
Wow.
So going back to the kids, it's like I've had these different situations in my life where the rug got pulled from underneath me.
Yeah.
And now at 43, I'm still trying to piece together who exactly am I? What do I want to do? What makes me tick? What makes me passionate about things? And I'm struggling because I feel there's like 12 directions I could go in, and I'm trying to hone in on like, okay, which 2 or 3 do I lean into right now?
To make you feel better, that's about the same age that I kind of started to think about. In my life, I was right where you're at right now. I
Okay.
was sober for about 5 years at that point, but you're still kind of getting thank you. Now it's more like 18, but
Awesome.
it's still fantastic, right?
Yeah.
I enjoy life, but I remember that feeling of who am I now?
Yeah.
You know? I was a musician. I was a successful musician. That was my identity from 9 years old until
Wow.
I became a horrible addict, right? I kind of lost my way there, and I wasn't even a musician at that point. I was just existing and surviving. But kudos to you for, having the guts to start over again and looking at it as an opportunity. I can hear the excitement in your voice. You're not sad about that,
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons when you guys mentioned about like talking about trauma and overcoming it, I think, and I'm actually starting my own podcast with a girlfriend of mine. It's going to be called the Brian Samoa Show, and that's kind
Awesome.
of the platform we want to go off of. That like life is just always hard.
Yeah.
And I think even before social media, because somewhere along the line, from my family, from culture, there's this sense of like there's an end point in life, and when you and it's not death, like there's an end point that when you reach that, from that point on, life is just like rainbows and butterflies,
Right.
And the reality is like, no, like you
no,
can get the job,
no.
you can make the money, you can get the wedding, like the marriage, everything you want. And but there is no end point, and there's always going to be like, if these 2, 3, or 4 areas are clicking really well and bringing you all this fulfillment and joy and all of that, it's like, great, but there's going to be an area or two that's going to really suck and be challenging.
Well,
and
like
that
we
can
were-
turn around, they can interchange and move which one does what when.
Right.
Like we were saying earlier, there's always that opportunity to start over. There's no targets. You know, it's not
Right.
when you're 18 you should do this. When you're 25 you should do this. You should have kids by the time you're 30. You know,
Right.
that's such BS. Your life is
agree.
your life. You have one life. It's your life. And so many people spend their entire life letting other people tell them what to do and who they should be. You know, it just drives me insane.
Yeah. And,
So
and
much so
honestly,
that I spend
that's
a
where
lot of
I
time
was
by
at.
myself.
Yeah. And that's where I was at, you know, because like the way that my childhood was structured due to my mom's own issues and stuff, like I spent my life trying to please her and being whatever version of myself that she needed, or that I thought she wanted so that I could earn her love kind of thing.
Sure.
And then I rolled that over right into a marriage to a narcissist who was pretty much the same exact way. And everything with like, who does he want me to be and how do I act? And not in like a phony way, you know, that I think
I
might
know what
come
you're saying.
across. It's just like you know, like I thought I loved this person. It was more of like an attachment, psychological kind of thing as well, because I had all this unhealed trauma that I didn't even baggage that I didn't even realize I
But
needed
then
to
you know
work
the flip
through.
side of that is when you start to not care what other people think, then you're an asshole.
Right.
Then they're
Right.
Right.
you know, oh, are
Yeah.
you living your life for yourself? How dare you? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
their
usually the
attitude towards
people,
you.
That's
but
not what
usually
I
the
wanted
people
for
who
you.
think that though are the people who benefited from you know, being
Bingo.
in the dark.
Right, but that's why their
Yeah.
statement is, well, that's not what I wanted for you. That's not what's best
Right,
for you.
right.
You need
Yep.
to do what I think is best for you because I know. You don't
Yeah.
know. You're just a child. You're 19 years old. I'm 40. I lived life. You need to follow
Yeah.
my guidance because I know what's right for you. And they don't. They don't. Like you did, like you said earlier with your
My daughter.
with your daughter and the dancing thing. I championed that as well. I thought that was brilliant that you made that statement, and Mike just beat me to the punch. But that was fantastic. That was a great way to approach that because your relationship stays strong because she doesn't resent you
Right.
because you didn't force her to do something she didn't want to do. Whereas Mike said, dance moms, most mothers and fathers, mind you, because boys, sports, things like that, they're so ingrained with you have to, that it just doesn't work, and then it creates that resentment, and then
Yeah, but then you
fractures the
get all these
relationship
kids
and
that are
blah,
just
blah, blah.
miserable, you know, and
Right.
not only that,
Yep.
but then you know, like the whole midlife crisis. It's like it's not really a midlife crisis. I think it's just people finally
Right.
being like, oh, wait a minute, like I'm
I'm gonna
looking
be
back
me.
and everything
Yeah.
I've done was for somebody else, and now I'm in this job that I don't even like or
Right.
know like what I'm not passionate about. And so like you start to kind of realize like it is my life. You know, it might happen
Absolutely.
when you're 35, 45, but it's like you realize that and you're like, you know what, I'm going to change jobs. I'm going to do this. And some people go an unhealthy route because they haven't dealt with the baggage and the trauma. So then they try to do like a 180, which isn't necessarily the answer.
That's a great point.
You know, and go like really dramatic with like, oh, rebelling against who they've been, that's not them. And then they go into other things that maybe isn't them either. But, you know, like I think midlife crisis is just more people getting to the point where they run out of fucks to give. Am I allowed to say that?
Absolutely.
You are.
And then they're like, let me see who I am and what I actually even like. And
You
so
know, that's
with
a
my
brilliant
kids,
point. I never really thought about that. That's a brilliant point.
yeah.
You gave me a new way to look at that. It is not a midlife crisis. It's that person woke up, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of really what I think. And so with my kids, I'm like, oh, like I don't want them to have that moment. And I was just having a conversation
love
with
that.
my 20-year-old yesterday about this because he's 6'7"
Wow.
and didn't touch a basketball until he was almost basically 8th grade, but he didn't really play until freshman year.
Wow.
His first ever basketball game, he got fouled and went to the foul line and did a jump shot because he didn't know that that's what you do. And
That's
so, but he like decided that he didn't make the 8th grade team, decided he was going to play the freshman team. Thankfully, my husband, his stepdad, is super supportive. So was like, yeah, do whatever he needs to do. So he and I used to spend hours in the car driving to all different kinds of private coaches and getting him wherever. And because he was like, well, now I want to play basketball and I want to play in college and I want to be able to play post college. It's like, really, can we just make the freshman team first?
Right.
But that's where he was at. And it was just like, okay, like, let's go. And he did. He got into a D3 school and did phenomenally well.
Right on.
Played from the first game on, was starting by his freshman year by about halfway point, was captain in training kind of a thing. Sophomore year, ended up being top scorer several games, even though it wasn't necessarily his role. Like he did great. Entered the portal. Now he's going to a D2.
Nice.
And he puts a lot of pressure on himself. And I try to balance the holding him accountable to what he is proclaiming he wants.
Sure.
You know, but also like giving him space, because it's like, it's not about me living vicariously through him and wanting him. Like, I don't want him to succeed more than he wants to succeed. But as his mom, I'm like, oh, I don't want you to look in the mirror like 10 years from now and be frustrated with yourself, you know,
because you didn't try,
like you just didn't stay as committed or as on track. So I would just tell him, like, you know, like I'm just your bumpers, you know, like in a bowling alley. And I'm just trying to put my bumpers up and make sure that you make it to the end and you knock down some pins, or you knock down the pins that you want, kind of thing.
Nice.
I always
feel like that's what my parents did for me. They set me up for success, right? They didn't intervene in my life. They didn't say, you're going to do this, you're going to be this.
Yeah.
It was all suggestions, right? You want to go be a professional musician? I would really suggest that you have a degree in something, right? They didn't force me to go there. It was solid advice. And I'd have a hard time arguing with what I call common sense logic, right? When someone tells you, if you move 2,000 miles away and you don't have a job to fall back on, you know, for at least the first 6 months,
right,
you're going to be right back here where you started.
See, I have a different mindset with that. And that could be the immigrant in me that, you know, just kind of makes a way. Cause like my daughter, when she wanted to dance, and she wanted to dance through freshman year, and then she quit going into her freshman year, and she wanted to dance professionally. And I used to tell her the opposite. I'm like, listen, when you turn 18, like, just go try dance, move to New York, move to LA. And this was pre-COVID, cause now post-COVID, which is the benefit of going into modeling and acting now, is that everything is basically online now, you know, so I self-tape. So it's not the same risk of tying up all this time and potential losing money working other shifts, because you can just do it at 2 a.m. at home, submit your self-tape and see what happens, kind of thing. And by the time that you have to call off work and go somewhere, you know, you've got the job. But because I used to tell her, like, like the lessons that you'll learn trying to make it, and this was before her teacher made it, because a choreographer that worked really closely with our studio, and then her dance teacher became the choreographer for pretty much the entire Latin world, reggaeton, like music videos, artists, you know, tours and all that. And then her teachers, she's on her 3rd tour now with a 3rd different artist. So like I said, a lot of it is kind of who you know. So she would have had that going for her. But I used to tell her all the time, it's like the lessons that you'll learn trying and, you know, working hard. And the reality is you can go back to college at any point.
I agree
with
that.
So it's like, I always said, I'm like, I don't want to be my kid's crutch, but I'm always willing to be their safety net. And so it's like, go try. And if it doesn't work, like, you can come back to home base, reset, and try the next thing, you know? So I feel like if you move somewhere like 2,000 miles away without a job, it's like, go bartend, go waitress, go, you know, cut lawns. Like, you figure something out. If you really want a thing bad enough, you figure it out.
We did, for sure. No question. The one thing that we had in common with you in the modeling world was, and Chris and Scott and Rick never saw this side of it because I booked all the gigs. We got rejected 50 times for every one time that somebody would let us in, until we developed some kind of legitimacy, right?
Right. And you build up the name,
You played a lot of Monday nights at midnight for 2 people for a long time, you know?
Yeah. We so now with the modeling stuff, you know, I was just talking to a few people who are doing really well right now. One, it takes about 2 to 3 years to start to kind of book consistently, because like you said, you have to build your resume and the legitimacy a little bit. And then 2, you know, because of self-tape, so people can be like, I submit to jobs, and I've gotten booked in jobs in New York and Nashville, and I'm in Ohio. And so it's like if you book 1 in 100 jobs that you submit for, like, that's a good result.
That's kind of where we started at. It was, you know, I was a lot like your son. It wasn't good enough to just know how to play a guitar. I didn't want to play other people's music. I want to play my own music, you know, and that's pretty arrogant. Well, it's even more arrogant when you walk in somebody's club that is world famous and established and say, my band's going to play on that stage. And they're like, no, you're not. Where have you played?
You have to have that kind of confidence. You know, like nowadays,
I kept going back. I was so stubborn back then. I just kept, I wouldn't do that now. I'm a different person. I really am. Chris will tell me things that I did back in the day, and I'm like, I can't believe I did that.
But you can't lose that completely. There's a little bit of that like manifesting, believing, projecting it out
for
there,
sure.
you know?
Yeah, it's still there.
For sure. I'm just a different person than that person was. You know, I had that fire and that hunger at that time for
that particular thing. You
I
probably
still
have it
have
for
it, but
something else now.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was so new back then. Music will always be my first passion. I mean, that's what keeps me grounded.
Yeah.
I just have a different approach to it than I did back then, for sure. That's the only thing I cared about. I was, you know, to use your French word, fuck that job is what I always said. You know, I'll find another job. I'm with the band, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that goes back to like whatever your big passion is at that moment, you know, you'll
Sure.
find a way to make that work. So right now, a couple years ago, like I said, I went through, you know, disappointment in my teens. Like I went through a really hard about 1.5 years of being pretty depressed right after I graduated high school, because it's like everything I had culminated that was supposed to be my saving grace, and I had done everything right. You know, I didn't go to the keggers in high school, and I was studying hard, you know, doing all these things to make it into what I wanted to. But then the rug, it wasn't good enough, because there was circumstances beyond my control that I could do nothing about. And then I started at the local community college, and my plan was, like I mentioned, my grandma was a U.S. citizen, and then at the time there was some like snafu law thing that I think it was Bush that did, that made it a little easier to try to get legal, like through your job, than it used to be for a couple of years. So then I was like looking into that, because where I worked was willing to do that. So I started going to community college, and I was just going to like do that for a couple of years. Hopefully my papers would come in time, and I was going to reapply to BU. And then in that process, ended up meeting my ex-husband, who, you know, promised up and down that he couldn't have kids, because he was older than me, and his ex-wife and him did have a child, but he was saying how they had to go through this whole hoopla, and it was him and blah blah blah, and it was like one damn fucking time.
Wow.
And I got pregnant, which is good, because I love my son. And you know, one of you guys made the comment about like not being bitter, and it's just like the ebbs and flows and the roller coasters, not to sound cliche, but it does make you who you are.
It does.
Absolutely.
And other parts of me that I wish weren't there, just because it's trauma responses and neural loops that are created. Like even I had a really hard, about 2 weeks ago, maybe I had a really hard 1 week where it was just like,
it must have been something in the air, because I was right there with you.
well, you know what? It was that strawberry full moon. And like something else, like
that was a gorgeous moon.
Like my husband was like,
"This
is my husband's like, these are the 3 things, you know." And he's like, "Just hang tight for like 3 or 4 days."
So real quick, where Chris and I part ways is I am an empath, like the poster definition of an empath, which is how I write music, and it comes to me through the universe. I'm the vehicle, right? I don't take any credit for it. He'll tell you, I don't understand that. That's not how I'm built, right? So that's where we part ways. And sometimes he has to say, here's how life is, and this is reality. And sometimes I have to say to him, you know, here's I am too, but I'm always going to be way more give people the benefit of the doubt, or the situation the benefit of the doubt, a little bit more than most people for a second.
So I might be a little bit more cynical than empath then, if that's.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like and again, this is really what I want to explore with our podcast, where it's like whatever you see, especially in this age with social media, you know, it's like if you look at my social media, which I know Chris dug deep there, I have a wonderful life, and it's beautiful now. You know, I'm so thankful for my husband and the relationship we have, and the things that we get to do, and the kids. But even in the middle of all this wonderful thing and beauty, there is still hard. Unfortunately, my ex-husband still stays intertwined, and so sometimes that comes into play, and you know, like court stuff and things is still going on, and that can get overwhelming. But yeah, like I just had this like week where it was just really hard, and I think part of it is just that neural loop from it's so important that people recognize that you can have everything go the way that you want, and whether it be that 1 or 2 areas just is going to be a struggle, or some of it is your baggage, and you have to be willing to look yourself in the mirror and unpack that closet and be like, oh, like this here, whether it's your fault or not that something happened, like you have to sift through it, be willing to let it go.
You have to do the work, as I always say to myself in my head, right? We're going to have to do some work now.
Right. You know, I, as a child, I was sexually molested several times. You know, like all these different crazy things have happened. Like I said, I had a, you know, hard marriage, hard divorce, like and
But
it
you know
is
what?
just
Those make the most interesting people.
Well,
They
yeah,
always,
if
it's
you
sad
let
that
if
people
you
have to
let
go through
I mean,
that, but
if they let it grow them, right? Because
correct.
unfortunately, a lot of people go through things like that. And my husband's parents was people like that. Like my husband's another person whose story is insane. Like I'm gonna plug him that you guys should have him on the show.
We'd love
Because
to.
he has a crazy story of like, where did you come from based on your upbringing?
Oh,
And
yeah.
just to be such a giving, loving man that he is, with like he's zero bitterness. Like I struggle with some bitterness and unforgiveness towards certain things. Way like he doesn't even have that. And just I mean, he's by far the
I
strongest
feel
person
like
I've
I've
ever
gotten
met.
so much better at that myself. I used to be a very hateful person. Like everything was negative. It's my way or the highway.
Yeah,
I'm pretty much the antithesis of that now.
that's awesome.
I did a 180, but it took about, well, till right now talking to you that I'm still
Well, I
working
think
on it,
too, the
right?
other thing is like you can get there. Like even my daughter with autism, right? Like we've gotten so far, and 90% of the time she's phenomenal.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, like whether it's a full moon thing, whether it's something she ate, whether it's sometimes we don't know what it is, like she just kind of reverts to some of the initial days with the tantrums and the aggressions and things like that. And I think it's like that for all of us. I think some of us carry more baggage or have more trauma than others, and have to be willing to and you have to be willing to look at the science of it too, because I
Sure.
think there's a lot more information on that nowadays than there used to be. And so you don't have to sit there and be like, this is just how I am, or this just happened to me, you don't understand. It's like, no, like, yes, like this happened to you. Yes, it'd be so much harder for you than maybe the person who's like trauma is just like your average trauma of life, because everybody has challenges. But it's like there is science behind it, like the grooves and the neural loops of your brain, and it is learning how to like interject those and cut
For
them
sure.
short.
But
Well,
that's one
So
thing I'll give Chris credit for. He grew up, he hasn't talked about it because, we've been sharing your story, but he grew up in a horrible environment, and he's one of the most positive people I've ever known. And I've known him for 30 some years. I mean, he's the same person mentally, spiritually, physically that he was when I met him. I mean, he's just
Wow.
always upbeat, and especially when things get bad. Like when we had challenges in the beginning with this show, he would always be the person that would be like, it's going to be fine, it'll be
you
all
just got to
right.
stick it through.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
awesome.
losing my mind. I'm
Yeah,
cussing. I'm saying words you don't even know exist. And he's over there going, dude, it's me, man. Mellow out. We're going to
Well,
get through
it's,
it, right?
Yeah, yeah, because I'm a big
I
believer
love that about him.
Thank you. I'm a big believer in who you are in your life right now. Who I am right now in my life is defined by how I was brought up. Everything happens for a reason. I've never played the blame game. My brother plays the blame game all the time. I never have, because what's the point?
Right.
It just all it goes nowhere. So it's just, you have to accept the fact, okay, I went through these things in life, but those things in life, I had two directions to go, and I went this way instead of that way. And because I went this way, then those are just stepping stones that make you the character, make you the man that you are. Even at 55, you still grow, you still learn, you still evolve. I'm more
Yeah.
patient now than I was when I was raising my kids, and now it's because I have my two grandsons, and it's different. My wife tells me all the time, there's an Anthony's rule, but it's you don't you don't see it when you're raising your own kids, because we didn't have examples, so we were kind of
Yeah.
like pulling out things out of the air. And I even told my son, in the older, he remembers the conversation. We was at a baseball game, and I was trying to get him to choke up on his bat and step into the pitch when he swung, and I was sitting behind home plate, and he wasn't listening. So I literally got up behind home plate with all the parents, like, dude, pick up your leg, and step and swing, step and swing. He was so pissed on the way home, and then he finally told me why, and I was like, oh. I was like, okay, you got to give me some grace, dude. I'm a first-time dad. Like, I had
Right.
no example. I said, so I'm going to make mistakes, but I will never do that to you again. I will never call you out again in any way, shape, and form like that, because I didn't realize what I was doing was embarrassing. I thought I was being a helpful father, trying to remind my son, step into the pitch, so you're going to drive it further.
See, that's so cool. Just like she did, though, to take his
Right.
side and understand where he
Yeah.
was coming from is so advanced in parenting,
Yes.
forward thinking. But parents didn't think like that.
No.
Agreed.
I think it's so important
That's so
now.
cool, man. That's a great story.
Yeah, I think it's so important, like what you mentioned, Chris, about evolving and growing, and like how you're different at 55 than you were when you're raising your kids. It's like some people just don't have a growth mindset.
Right.
And and that's what that is. Like, it's just so important that, you know, you are like, it sounds like that's what you do, you know, it's like you're willing to always say, like, I haven't peaked, right? Like, I haven't, there's no target. Like, I'm still learning and growing and evolving in the different aspects.
A lot of it's because of my wife. My wife puts me in check all the time, and she's, you know, we've been together 30 years, so it's, you know, she'll reel me in when I need to be reeled in, and she's real good at it. So
That's awesome.
we got about 5 minutes left. So what else you want to share, and where to talk about what you have upcoming, so we can drive people to you and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. So originally I got back into modeling thinking that I was going to do that as a side thing because I really wanted to get into my podcast and as well as some life coaching.
Cool.
And the premise behind that is, like I mentioned, you know, and we touched upon in different ways, like I've gone through just about everything you can possibly go through, you know, from being here an immigrant, sexual abuse stuff, traumatic childhood, you know, narcissistic divorce, things like that.
Sure.
And so I just want to be able to share from that platform and be able to, whoever I'm trying to help, whether it be through our podcast episode or coaching, I can look them in the face and say, I know what it's like to be in your shoes, but here's how we can move past that and get you into where you want to be. But then eventually, totally by happenstance, the modeling thing became kind of a bigger thing, and I ended up being booked as a core extra for Superman.
Cool.
Who comes
That's
out
awesome.
on the 11th.
Nice.
So I got to be on
Congratulations.
set. Yeah, thanks. I got to be on set for 7 days. I
Wow.
got to be a police officer. There's going to be a scene where he's like walking through a crowd and he goes into a building and there's a police officer by the door. So one of the days I was that police officer. So sometimes
Nice.
it might be me, sometimes it might be not.
When does that come out?
It comes out July 11th.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But I don't really know, like, if and when I'll
Right.
make.
You're gonna
I know
find out
that
when you
my
watch it.
back,
Right.
you know, me walking towards Superman, so my back and my hair made the previews. So we'll see where I end up there. But I also got to work on Happy Gilmore 2, so that comes out.
Cool.
And I again have no idea how the final edits will work. Couple of the TV shows, Friends and Neighbors, which is a big show that
Yep.
everybody's been
we
talking
just
about.
watched that.
Okay.
So did you end it?
Yeah, we did. We watched the whole
Okay,
thing.
so the episode at the end where they have the body dead in the house,
Okay.
the big fat guy is like dead on the ground
Yeah.
of the house.
Yeah.
If
yeah.
you watch that again, the medical examiner in the back behind
Yeah.
the detective talking, that's me. So you get to
Awesome.
see me
Right
on
on.
that. So
Okay.
yeah, so I have some of
Okay.
those fun projects coming on, but the biggest thing is definitely the podcast coming out, the Brian Samoa Show, BRY. Is my girlfriend's name, and then in Samoa Show. We're going to have a website, Brian Samoa, where we're going to launch initially more of the podcast stuff, but then eventually some
Okay.
blogs and the coaching, the life coaching stuff that I'm excited about.
That's
So
awesome.
how do people? So how do people find you online right now? Just
So you can find me on Instagram, Samoa Kormanik, SAMUAKORMANIK,
Okay.
MICKEY. No, I'm just kidding.
That's me.
MOUSC.
So Samoa Kormanik on Instagram, that's probably, and then same thing for Facebook. So that's
Okay.
mainly the two places right now. And then I am on a couple episodes of my husband's podcast, which is called Mind Body Marathon.
Okay.
And
Thus
I'm-
the runner tie there.
Yep,
Mind Body
yep.
Marathon.
So there's an
Nice.
episode called I Hate Running,
Okay.
which is me.
I'll check it out.
Everybody hates
I'm right
running
there
for the
with you.
first. Everybody hates running for the first
Oh
mile.
no, I've been running for like 12 years. I still hate it.
Okay,
But I did run
okay.
12 miles today. I have a full marathon coming up because
Right
my
on.
brother, who I love dearly and love to have him visit, who usually comes from Luxembourg only for like a handful of days, he's like, hey, I'll come for 10 days if you and I do this full marathon. And it's a trail marathon, which I've
Oh,
never
those
done.
are fun. No, the trails
wow.
are some because we're running. Nick and I are runners. We've probably done 60
Yeah.
marathons, but the trail ones are so much more fun because you're up and down. It's terrain. It's not.
Yeah,
constant
I
pavement.
don't, I
And
mean,
they
I
go
think
by-
our definitions of fun are different. My
Well, no,
definition
but-
of fun is dancing and Zumba and,
But it's gonna go
know.
by. It's gonna go by quicker because you have so many different things to look at while you're
I
running,
hope
so it
so.
distracts you. Plus, run with music; it'll help.
Yeah. But yeah, so check out, if you guys are runners, check out Mind Body Marathon. It's
Yeah,
on Spotify
absolutely.
and all that. But the episode I Hate Running, I'm on that one.
Okay,
And then there
cool.
is an episode where my daughter is on. We did one on autism and Naomi
Okay.
pops in at the end. So you get
Right
to
on.
see her as well.
Okay.
Real quick,
Yep.
everybody give a shout out to Michael because he watched
Michael.
the whole episode and he said,
Woohoo,
great
Michael!"
show tonight, guys. So thank you very much, Michael.
Thank
Appreciate you tuning
you.
in.
Thank you,
That's
Michael.
awesome.
So we wrap everything up with don't let the bad days win. Somebody will miss you. Somebody loves you. Don't leave a hole in somebody else's heart because you're
love
feeling bad
that.
today. Go talk to somebody. Go to bed. Wake up
Yes.
tomorrow. It's going to be a better day.
Tomorrow is always a new day,
always a
and that's
better
what
day.
I always try to remind myself.
Always a better day. For
We do
Mike
too.
Michaels,
Yes.
Chris Dunham, and Samoa Kormanik. This is the Chris and Mike Show. Until next time, see ya. Love
See
you.
ya.
brother. Peace.
Love you too, man.
Aw.